All right, so like I said today, we're moving into contemporary times. And because what we're about to study now are the apocalyptic texts, right? So what do I mean by apocalypse? Anybody? Let me write it on the board. So apocalyptic literature. What is the apocalypse? Anybody know the meaning? Yes.
I guess
It is, but it means literally something else. Yeah. Sorry. Almost.
Is it a war to end the world?
No, you're the Greek, right? So you
Yeah.
should know.
Revelation.
Very good. Oh,
Yeah.
you're good. Do you speak Greek?
Yeah, I'm bilingual.
Oh, very nice. So yeah,
Amazing Greek.
Revelation, just like the book of Revelation, right? So it means simply revelation. So this is one of the prophetic books we're going to read. But in general, apocalypse also assimilated with what, like you said, the end of times, right? The like you said, the violence, the wars, the upheavals that will occur in the end of times. And I don't know if you noticed, but in all three monotheisms, right? Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, people are talking a lot more about the end of times than they were in the past, right? How many of you have sensed this? That there is a kind of end of time discourse that is really growing. How many have?
And I think it happens in every generation, like an equal amount. Every
That's
generation
true.
thinks they live in a time.
Yes, I remember in 2000 when it switched to 2000, and you guys were not born yet, I suppose. No, you weren't. Yeah. So we were all talking about, but yeah, okay. So, but today, right? You're sensing. Where are you who is speaking? Where are you sensing it?
I'm actually not sensing it today.
You're not, right? Okay, because we talked about it. I remember. Anybody else?
I think I don't know who I was talking to, but we were just somehow it's funny that generationally, like every generation does have this type of feeling of the world ending, but it as the generation has gone on, the ending of the world has gone closer. And this can be seen through like music and culture. Like you could say early 2000s music was always about tomorrow's the end of the world. We should live young.
Okay.
That was like how like that was
Yeah.
the theme of music in 2000. Now the music theme is it's the end of the world. Everything is gone to shit.
Okay.
The generation
Yeah.
90s is like we still have a couple we still are living,
Yeah.
but we should make it better. And like
Oh, there was still hope, right? That
yeah,
we could
every
make it better.
generations
Gets more pessimistic.
has gotten like
Yeah.
the day is coming closer.
Nice. In literature, so you're in complete. Are you? Are you?
No,
Where are you? What is your major?
Psychology.
Ah, okay.
Minor philosophy of physics.
Ah, got you. Okay. What about literature? Have you seen anything or the movies or cinema? Literature I have, but what about cinema? Cinema is easy. There's a
Yeah.
lot, right?
I would say modern day, like literature that's being written today, it's a lot about fairy tale. Like they don't even want to think about
Okay.
they don't even want to think about
Yeah.
the end of the world when they're writing.
Escapist.
Utopia,
Okay, so yeah, that's
like
it.
in the modern day, a lot.
Got it. Good, good. What about you, Gubin? Anything in your community about the end of times?
I mean, people talk a lot about it, especially with what's going on in the Middle East. Something needs to change one way or the other. And
What are they saying? So you're in the Jewish community. What are they saying about
it
the end of
depends
times?
which side of the Jewish community. Like, there's two different views on it. Some people
Tell me.
take, the view that you're talking about from the book of like the Jewish people need to do more to, within our own community because there were problems in our own community to begin with before the war started, especially when it comes to Israel politics and the way that, we've responded to the crisis. And then there's people that are like very hardcore on one side, that Israel has the right to defend itself and is doing everything that they can, and there's nothing that they could possibly be doing better. So it kind of depends.
But in
which
terms of
side.
messianic, in terms of end of time scenario, is there any
I mean,
speech of
it's
that?
all based on the war. Like,
Okay.
because the
Well-
war kind of started, a lot of people say that, the war is going to end, and then when the war ends, depending on which way it goes, that if Israel is the winner, then we're gonna, Messiah is gonna come.
Oh, okay. So they connect the end of
They
the
do
war
connect
to
it, yeah,
Messiah?
a little bit.
That's interesting. What's that? I had never heard of that.
It's just rabbis talking in
Okay.
schools on like shows.
Because what's the verse? What's the text?
They're not really giving a verse, they're
Okay.
kind of just explaining it. in that-
Interesting. Okay, okay. So they see it kind of like the end of time,
Right,
Gog
it's
and
also-
Magog,
There's
kind
like
of.
Zionism spirit in
Yeah.
America in terms of like there's so much anti-Semitism, so a lot of people are moving to Israel and that's.
Oh, so the exiles,
so
right, are
when
coming
people come
back.
back to Israel, it's always messy.
Got it, got it. Have you heard something?
Correct,
Yeah.
you know what the Lubavitch are, you know,
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure. Where they
don't the
say.
Lubavitch believe becoming the Mashiach will tell us about the end of time?
Yep.
They say that Mashiach is soon to come. They pointed, 30 years ago to the riots in Crown Heights, the upheaval that was going on in the Middle East at that time with Iraq and whatever. And he said Mashiach will come, and when the Mashiach comes, that symbolizes basically almost the end of the world, am I
Okay,
right?
good. So yes, we have the Chabad, right, who are very messianic, which we'll talk about. Good point. Okay, in Christianity, any talk of the end of the world? Let's see. You're the Christian side. Yes, go ahead.
They said, it always happens in immigration, but I guess I have everything saying there's always speculations, but no one can say when it's gonna end, but people are saying that by looking at the times and studying what's written in the New Testament, they're saying it looks like it can be
Give example of those
like,
Ex- scriptures they're quoting.
where he was warning his disciples saying, there will be earthquakes in rich places, wars, rumors of wars, etc. And he says that these will be the birth made before the end of the world.
Okay, good, good. So definitely, right? You have the predictions of Jesus. Are they quoting any revelation? Anybody have revelation being quoted in your communities? What about the United States, the push to make the United States a Christian nation? Anything that you've heard? Nobody? Good. Well sheltered in New York City. Very good. Okay, we'll talk about all these things. So okay, so definitely we have an exacerbation, right, of the disc, perhaps. It like always, right? Or perhaps there's something new, we don't know. But definitely it's in the air. It's in the air in Christianity, it's in the air in Judaism, it's in the air in Islam. So and there is so in addition to people noticing, right, that we're moving closer to what they believe is the end times, we're also seeing people trying to hasten things, to push things in the direction, right? So we have also a push to help, right, to bring the world to its brink, right? So we have so it's not just where people are not just waiting, people feel they have a responsibility to get things moving. And the question is, of course, does violence play a role in that, right? And our class, of course, is we know already where we're gonna go, right? We know already the view on violence. Now we've explored it quite a bit. So we have the possibility to look critically at these movements, right? These what I call apocalyptic or eschatological movements. This is another important word you need to have. Eschatological movements. Okay, eschatological, our Greek, Nikolopoulos, what does it mean?
So, okay, logical is obvious, but,
Eschaton, what is eschaton?
I'm not sure, but the way that I've interpreted is that, like, something that is not desired or maybe, or uneasy, or no?
It's the end. Eschaton means the end.
Yeah.
So it's about time of the end, right? So
Yeah,
this
yeah.
course, eschatological movements are movements that are moving, that are trying to move things towards the end, right? So some of these eschatological movements are going to be violent, forceful, coercive, and we're going to look at that and see what the biblical text, we're going to evaluate these movements in the light of the biblical text, right? So I want to talk today about three things: Christian nationalism, Jewish messianism, and modern eschatology. Can't speak, eschatology. So there's three eschatological movements right now, can't speak. Christian nationalism, Jewish messianism, And Muslim eschatology. Eschatology. Yeah, these are happening right now, since the beginning of the 20th century. Right, these are new movements which were not in the past. They have exacerbated. It's all occurred towards mid-19th century up until today. And we need to talk about them. So because we are in them, right? We are
Christian one is it?
Christian nationalism,
Yeah.
Jewish messianism, Muslim eschatology. Sorry, it's Christian, yeah. And messianism, of course, you all know the word Messiah, right? It's the everybody, Messiah? No? Messiah is simply the Redeemer, right? This is the Redeemer that the Jews are waiting for, that the Christians are waiting for, right? There's this idea that there's a Redeemer going to come, save the world, right? And there's going to be a messianic time. This is in Judaism, right? There's going to be a messianic time where this Redeemer comes, Israel is liberated, and then all the nations are in a way illuminated by Israel. This is kind of the idea, right? So we have Christian nationalism, Jewish messianism, Muslim eschatology. Okay. Good. Now, the reason I'm bringing those up again, right? We are in these movements right now, and we have to be discerning. This is why I'm talking about this, right? We are in these movements. This is happening, and we have to be discerning what is going to be our stance, right? Yes. Messianism, right? And I'll talk about each one, right? So the key here, right? Why I'm teaching this, right? You can jot this down, is that we are in these movements and we need to know how to discern, right? Are we going to follow these movements? Are we going to challenge these movements? And of course, we're going to look at the biblical text in order to guide, right? To see how the biblical text would steer us in these times. Okay? Any questions so far? Okay. All right. Christian nationalism. Okay, when did it start?
Well, I can give you an example. An
Sure.
example.
Go ahead.
It's going on in Hungary with Viktor Orban.
Thank you for that. You're right. It's not just in the US. So we have a rise of, so this is interesting, right? Christianity quickly became political, maybe around 500 AD, right? At first it was persecuted. This just to give you a history of Christianity, right? Jesus arrives on the scene, makes disciples, Christianity spreads. Initially, they are persecuted by the Roman Empire. Eventually, they, what's the word? They, what am I doing? They join forces there. They join forces with the Roman Empire. The emperor Constantine converts to Christianity and makes Christianity the official religion of Rome. At that point, Christianity shifts, its mentality shifts. From persecuted, it becomes persecutor, right? And for centuries, Christianity will oppress whoever is not a Christian. And it culminates, of course, in the Middle Ages with the Inquisition, which went all over the world, including Latin America, and so forth, right? So that's the phase one of Christian history. Yes.
So apparently it's a common misconception. I learned this like last month, but apparently Constantine converted to Christianity, but he wasn't the one who made it the official religion.
Oh,
It was
okay.
either the emperor that came after him or like some emperor later.
All right, could well be. Yeah, definitely. But shortly after Constantine, and it's a beautiful story, by the way. I mean, the legend goes that I think he was already being, I think his mother was a Christian, and she was, praying for him, and he was a very hardcore, ruthless soldier. He was a general. He became emperor. And he says that there was a war. How was it? It's a beautiful story. It's like he had a dream, I think, where he saw all the shields of his army. Or no, he saw a cross in the sky or something. And then, yeah, he saw a cross in the sky and he saw himself defeating the enemy, right? So I think the next day he had everyone carve a cross in their shields, and they went out and they defeated the enemy. And after that, he converted, right? So, okay. So that's phase one. So Christianity, after that, Christianity is overturned by Napoleon, actually. He imprisons the last pope at the time, right? So Napoleon, you all know Napoleon, right? The French emperor. So and Christianity kind of fades out. I mean, in Europe, it's over after that, right? Christianity really is weakened, is barely a few, and if you go even today in churches, it's not well attended, it kind of lost its punch, right? Okay, now, however, since the beginning of late 19th century. Christianity is reawakening, right? And you have, of course, but it's reawakening in an interesting way. It's reawakening as a form of nationalism. It's connected to nationalism, right? So you have this idea that we are a Christian nation. And this is all over, like you said, Hungary, Poland, France, UK, and so forth. You have this resurgence of we are Christian nations. Why are there so many Muslims, Jews, pagans, Hindus, or whoever here? Why are there so many atheists? We need to go back to being who we are, Christian nations, right? So this is a resurgence of Christianity, but it's a new form. It's not just religion. It's a form of nationalism. It's a claim of identity, right? Christianity used to be a movement. It used to be a spiritual path. Now it's an identity, right? And so you have this notion of we want to be Christian again. We want to purify the nation and bring it back to its Christian roots. Okay? Now, again, I'm just describing, right? We will challenge this later, but right now this is what is happening. You can see this everywhere. And I'm going to talk about how it plays out here in the US, but you see this in France with, I just talked to a boyfriend of family member of mine. So he just arrived, this new boyfriend. And already he's in trouble with the kids of that person. So she's a cousin of mine and her kids. And she started this relationship with this Christian nationalist French guy. And he's talking to me how Islam, is essentially violent and they want to take over France and we need to push them out and go back to being Christian. And why are there mosques? There should be only churches. And he's tired of hearing, this chanting. He wants just bells, right? So and I'm seeing like the prototype, right? This is the prototype of the Christian nationalist, the French Christian nationalist. And you have this is growing in France. France used to be completely secular. And religion they wanted nothing to do with religion, but now this is happening and they want a Christian nation. They want to get rid of whoever is not Christian. So of course, first of all, the Muslims, but the Jews are next in line. They shouldn't think that they're safe anywhere in the world. So that's in France. In Hungary, you have the same phenomenon. You have this in Russia, right, with Putin who has a strong alliance with the Orthodox Church, right, and is kind of they support him because he's supporting conservative values, right? And then you have this in let's see, Poland. I mean, pretty much all over the world. And here, of course, it's gaining prominence. So let me describe how it plays out here, so you have a little idea what's happening. It has to do with the election of Trump. There is some interesting connection between what Trump is doing and the Christian nationalist agenda. So this is interesting. This is a movement that arose within evangelical Christianity. So we are more Catholic here in New York, but this is more in the South, right? You have a lot of evangelicals. And it's the idea, and it's just a couple people who had these ideas, but they're very powerful ideas, is the notion that we need to reclaim our Christian roots as a country. We have forgotten who we are, how we were founded. And it's true, country was founded by Christians, right? To a certain degree. It's Christians who fled Europe and wanted to create a country that's a safe haven for Christians, actually, and then everybody joined in, right? But initially, you can argue absolutely that Christians founded the country. So they want to go back to this. And so they base themselves on the biblical text where, if you recall, Genesis 1, God gave Adam and Eve dominion over the world, right? So they say, hey, we Christians should have dominion over the world. We shouldn't be cowering away in little corners of our homes, ashamed of our faith. We should be out there ruling the world in a Christian way. We should be establishing the kingdom of the world here and now. So so a whole branch of them, in addition to this, so to understand the urgency of this, they believe that Jesus will not return until the United States and the world have become Christian again. Right? I don't know if you've heard any of this. Anybody have you heard a little bit about it, of this, what I'm saying? Have you heard about it? Until the world has become Christianized, or people, right? So, okay. So, and they believe it's not about just spreading the gospel, right? Because usually the belief is we have to share Jesus and then Jesus will come. But here, we have to make the world Christian, right? So in terms of political system, right? So they believe that once the US has become again reclaimed its Christian roots, then it will influence the world, and the world will see the United States like a shining city on a hill, and itself become converted to Christianity, and then Jesus will come back, right? So there's an urgency. They have to do this to bring, right, the reign of Jesus. So how many of you have heard about the 7-mountain mandate? I'm glad I'm introducing you to this. These are things that are affecting the direction of our country, right? So, okay, 7-mountain mandate is the idea that we need to conquer, as Christians, 7 mountains. So take note, in our culture, right? We need to conquer the mountain of religion, of family, of education, of business, of media, of the arts, and of the government, right? Let me say it again. Religion, family, education, business, media, the arts, and government. So Christianity needs to make an imprint on all those levels, right? Family, education, business. So religion, family, education, business, media, the arts, government. Okay, so if you're, how many of you are familiar with Project 2025? Okay, this is outlining this, right? If you've read it, this is the idea of bringing Christianity back into, obviously religion, but back into the family. So what does this imply? To make families Christian again. Well, who's taking a hit here?
To do the Christian thing.
Hmm?
To do the Christian
What does
thing.
it? Who's
Men and women.
exactly? It's got to be a man and a woman. So if you're not a man or a woman, to screw you. Right? We need to, right? So this is why there's such a push, right? There's such a push against the whole woke agenda, what they call the woke agenda, or what they call, this notion that we shouldn't be talking about trans women. They're not women. There's just the latest decree by Trump that there's only a man and a woman. This is it, right? This is why Christians love Trump, right? He's there. We'll talk about his role, but he's accomplishing this agenda, right? Of decreeing there's only a man and a woman, end of story. And of course, gay marriage is going to be hopefully overturned. Abortion, of course, we need to get rid of that. So, yes.
Sorry, I just want to tell you that if you read what the mandate says, it says that there are only 2 sexes based on what you are at conception.
At
And
conception.
if
There's
you
no
know
sex at
basic-
conception.
Oh, if you understand basic biology, it's that after conception, all zygotes start out as female. So
Oh,
that would
that's
mean-
funny.
That would mean it negates the whole male sex.
Wow,
And
that's really
yet
funny.
people criticized him on it, and he whenever they were doing interviews, he would change the subject.
Yeah, no, it's birth, right? Yeah, I'm sure he meant birth, but yeah, that's funny. That's funny. Okay, so you can see that you see this in education, right? With this breakdown, the last decree against the breakdown of the Department of Education has to do with bringing education back to the states, which means what? It means more Christian schools, right? More homeschooling. Why? So that people are educated in a Christian way, right? So the idea is to not have public schools which teach a kind of, generic, right? It's more, they want to reinvest into private schools, into homeschooling, so that the education will have a strong Christian foundation, right? That is what is behind that. Business, I wish they would infiltrate business. I would like that to happen, right? Where is that? That would be nice. The media, I don't know if you saw, and not all of it, I'm not saying any of this is bad, right? I'm being completely objective. I'm showing media, you have a resurgence of Christian films. How many of you have seen The Chosen? I love The Chosen, right? Okay, you see some of it, right? This is again, right? In media now, we have a strong Christian presence, right? The arts, there's an intention to maybe have more Christian music, more, right? And then finally, of course, government, right? And now this brings us to Trump, which, so of course you wonder how I'm sure you're aware that I think it is 80% of white evangelicals, male and female, I think, voted for Trump, and people were like, why? He's so not Christian, right? He's a womanizer, right? He's greedy. Why they vote for him? Well, it's very simple. they see him as a kind of Cyrus. They call him Cyrus the Messiah. Let's talk about that. So Cyrus, and we're going to study this when we look at the book of Daniel, he was a king. So the Israelites were exiled in Babylon. You know this by now a little bit. And then he was one of the kings of Babylon who let them go back to their homes. And he actually paid for it. He was amazing. And he's depicted in the Jewish tradition as a kind of Messiah, savior, right? Who brought the Jews back home, paid for the rebuilding of the temple, right? So many Christians, they say, yeah, Trump is, he's not a Christian. I mean, they're aware, they're not fooled by his, bullshit. They see clearly he's not a Christian, but they see he's someone that's working for us, right? Which is true. And they see him, they call him the Cyrus of Christianity, right? He's the redeemer of Christianity, which will help to rebuild the temple, which will help to rebuild the Christian nation, right? So they vote for him because he has himself, in a way, pledged himself to bring about many of what they want to happen, right? And we see this, right? So that's in government, of course, right? So that's the mandate. This is the intention now that is happening. Yes, go ahead.
No, but related to this, it was very interesting. Vivek, right? The Indian candidate for the Conservative Party, the Vivek Ramaswamy,
Yeah,
talked about his, how difficult it was for him and why he thinks this is why he wasn't able to like get nominated. How difficult it was for him to like compete as somebody that was openly not a Christian, didn't pretend to be a cultural Christian at all. He's like, no, I'm a Hindu.
Yeah, well,
that's my religion. I'm not
he had no
forsaking
chance.
my family values. He talked about like very like difficult campaigning, like conversations he had to have with pastors. They're we commend you for standing up for conservative values, but we cannot in good faith like vote for you, or I can't tell my congregation to vote for you because you're not Christian.
Exactly.
And like I'm not used to that because like living in New York, like we all treat each other fairly like normally based off religion. You don't think it's that much of a problem.
Exactly.
But like this guy could not get nominated.
Absolutely. Vivek.
Right, who was saying his name right?
He's a Hindu guy. You know him. I can't say his name. Ramaswamy. Yeah. Anyways, so this is interesting because you're right, and Trump had to kind of, Christianize himself a little bit, right? He had to hold the Bible a couple times, he had to show.
So the vice president is like
he's a very strong Christian, so that helps, right? Because Trump, he tries, but it doesn't work. Right? It's not, nobody takes him seriously, right? So anyway, so we have this, right? And the goal, honestly, the goal is laudable. The goal is to usher in the second coming of Christ, right? So I understand. I mean, and they have a point, right? The country is a little bit, in their views, going crazy. No more genders, no more, where are we going? Men are women are men. The sacred marriage institution is broken. And we have, so many. Everybody's an atheist now, and so forth. So they're concerned, and they want to bring, the country on what they consider to be the right path. And for them, it has to be done. And this is the key here. This is what we will challenge. They feel that they have to move politically to make this happen. So they want to hasten the coming of Jesus, which is laudable, is good. But they feel that they have to do so using political means, right? And that is where it becomes, according to the biblical text, which we will read, problematic, right? You can spread the gospel, and you can impose the gospel. There are these are two different things, right? So we're going to look at this, right? But I wanted you to be aware of what's happening, right? So there's two things that we're noticing here. Yes, go ahead.
Before you move on, just wondering, would you relate the passage? I forget the exact context, but Jesus was asking in the Testament, like something about Caesar, like the taxes. I forget the exact context. Caesar's what is Caesar, and God what is God.
Yeah.
So, like, is that related?
He's separating there, right?
Is that related?
Absolutely.
Separation.
Yeah.
Saying, no,
yeah, absolutely. We're going to study this, right? How does Jesus want his gospel to be spread? We're going to look at that, right? We're going to look at some of the texts in the gospels about how Jesus originally meant for his kingdom to come, right? But now this is how we're doing it, right? So I wanted to lay the groundwork so right? This is what is happening. So two things are happening, right? There are the way they're doing it. Number one, they're fighting for God, right? Which we know by now is that how it should be, right? Should we be fighting for for God or should God be fighting for us? But there is the notion of, you know, we want to hasten the kingdom. And number two, it's a kind of top-down approach versus bottom-up approach. So top-down in the sense that the government now, it's coming, right? There is an element of authoritarianism when it comes to the spread of the gospel, right? You, as a woman now, you will become in certain states criminalized for having an abortion. This is top-down. Right? It's no more the nice, you know, Planned Parenthood little clinics you could go to get some advice and, you know, you choose, right? No, right now it's imposed from above, right? Or you have and you know, this is one of the most powerful moments, right, of this top-down approach, where initially Christians, you know, they created these, what are they called? It's not Planned Parenthood, the Christian clinics that try to help you to not get an abortion. Anybody familiar with those? What are they called? So you can go to, you know, if you want to get an abortion as a woman, back in the day, in the Stone Age, right, before where we are now, you could, of course, get an abortion, or the Christian community had created counseling centers where you could go, and they would actually try to convince you not to get an abortion. They would give you adoption, you know, options. They would give you maybe some financial aid. So this was a Christian-based or a faith-based organization, right? So this is a bottom-up approach, right? So as a woman, you can go, you have a choice, and maybe I will follow this, you know, wonderful advice and get my baby in adoption. So it's a bottom-up approach where the Christians were, you know, kind of trying to influence, of course, the woman to not have an abortion, but it wasn't coming as a form of authority. Now, of course, with the law, it becomes a crime for a woman to get an abortion in certain states, right? So now we are in a more, when Christianity is merging with government, it becomes a more authoritarian approach to the spread of the gospel, a more top-down approach, right? And that's where we are today. Yes.
So ironically enough, from a legal perspective, it's the opposite, whereas the prohibition against like keeping somebody away from abortion came from the top down because of Roe v. Wade. There was a Supreme Court ruling. Now that ruling's been overturned, the question is being left to the states, and it's state governments that are not deciding on the question.
Exactly.
That are individually from state to state, like either keeping women or allowing.
Exactly. But the only issue is that now it's a crime, whereas before it wasn't a crime to either get or not get. Nothing was being criminalized. Now it's a crime, right? Whereas before it wasn't a crime. I guess that's the point, right?
It's down from the perspective of like state government. Like
Yeah, sure.
If you're living in a state.
Absolutely.
Legal,
Yeah.
State government telling you can't do it.
But it's top down now.
The federal state bottom up is now the federal government has no say. It's the state government.
I see what you're saying, but what I'm trying to say is that now it's a crime, meaning now there is an element of coercion with regards to abortion, whereas before it was an element of advice, right? So coercion versus advice. That's what I mean. But yes, you're right. This shift to the state is still top down. But what I mean is in the sense of coercion versus advice, I define coercion as top down and advice as bottom up. You see what I'm saying? Okay, so you can be a Christian organization trying to influence bottom up, but now it is more top down. Okay, so this is where we are. Bear in mind this. We will come back, of course, to this situation. Let's go now to Jewish messianism, which will help us understand the war in Gaza. So some of these, so the war in Gaza, great. Okay. The war in Gaza, in a way, is insoluble because we're dealing much more with ideology than we're dealing with actual political issues, right? Nationhood, it's much deeper than that. There's an element of ideology in both the Muslim and the Jewish context, which make it almost impossible for there to be any type of two-state solution, right? So we'll look at this. So Jewish messianism, you have three waves of Jewish messianism. So let me write this down. You have traditional messianism. You have secular Zionism. And you have religious Zionism. Okay? Good luck decrypting. No, clear? Okay. Traditional messianism, secular Zionism, Zionism, religious Zionism. Okay. So let's take a look. So, so in Jewish Messianism, so of course, if you're familiar with Judaism, now I'll give you a quick history of Judaism, right? You have the destruction of the temple. Well, you have the biblical text, which are, we've been talking about this, predicting a Messiah, predicting a Redeemer. Okay, great. You have the destruction of the temple of Jerusalem after Jesus dies on the cross. The Jews are spread everywhere. And there is this hope, right, that one day all the Jews will come back to Israel and that the Messiah will come back, and then Israel will become this light or this shining city on a hill, and all the nations will come to it and benefit from its light and wisdom. In a nutshell, Messianic times. Okay, everybody got that? Should I say it again?
First the Messiah comes, then the Jews go back to Israel. First the Messiah.
Well, it's we don't know for sure who's gonna come first, but for now, definitely there's a movement of Jews going back to Israel since the 19th century. So people are like, oh, okay, Messiah is coming soon. So right, three things had to happen before the Messiah comes. Jews come back to Israel, temple is rebuilt, Sanhedrin is recreated, right? So the Sanhedrin is the council of wise men, right? So now Jews are seeing, oh my gosh, all these people have flooded to Israel. Israel has become a Jewish state in the early 20th century. They're sensing, okay, it's Messianic times, right? Okay, so before that, you had, of course, traditional Messianism, first one. So this was when the Jews were still in exile. For 2,000 years after the destruction of Jerusalem, after Jesus died on the cross, they were exiled, right? And not that they're connected. So they're exiled. And so they're longing, of course, for the Messiah to come. And it was supposed to come, the Messiah is supposed to come and make everything happen, right? So Jews just have to wait, right? Jews have to wait, be good, follow the law, be pure, just have to wait. Then in the late 19th century, you have a movement called secular Zionism, right? Zionism from Zion, which is the place where God, where the city of Jerusalem stands, right? Secular Zionism, you have Jews starting to emigrate. Israel is not yet a state, right? Jews are starting to immigrate to Palestine. At the time, Palestine is let's see, was it British or Ottoman? Do you know?
Depends when.
When did the Ottoman give up?
First, I think the Brits took over.
When did they
in the
take over?
20s.
1920s?
think
Oh,
so.
so it's before. So Israel is still under Ottoman rule. The Jews are coming from Eastern Europe, Russia. They're immigrating. They want to just settle there, just to study, live. You have a lot of religious Jews going there just to study. No state, right? They're coming into the Ottoman Empire. And then little by little with the British Empire, they still under British rule, they come, and now it's more the Marxists from Soviet Union. They're persecuted as Jews. So they flood to Palestine, which is still under British mandate, right? And now they're much more, they're not religious, they're secular, and they want to, start to have some crops and agriculture. So they buy some land and they settle and so forth. So then you have the Holocaust, right? And then Europe is just like riddled with guilt. They're like, we need to give these people a state, right? 6 million Jews genocided. So they create, so at the time it's still under British rule, the Britons say, we will give up this land for you. There was also talk of a parallel land for the Palestinians, but they refused, and we'll see why in a second, right? So they refused, and there's reasons for that. The Israelis say yes, Israel is formed, and you have mostly secular Zionists building the country. The country is leaning to the left. The country is secular and atheistic, and they want to build a country where Palestinians can live freely, where it's a democratic nation. There's no emphasis on religion or anything messianic. They just want a state, right? Little by little, you have then the beginnings of religious Zionism. And this is now it's interesting because religious Zionism, there's an element of tremendous light, and then there's a dark side, right? So we're going to look at that. So religious Zionism started with a very powerful mystical rabbi called Rav Kook. Very important. Sadly, most of his work is not translated in English, but he's very important. And he was a mystical rabbi who was interested, who was reading into this influx of Jews back to Israel, he was seeing we are at the cusp of messianic times, right? And he's saying we should encourage this, we should support the state of Israel. So he's saying instead of being passive, we should work and establish this state, and because this is the beginning, we are in a way preparing the path for the Messiah to come. So he's the first one who sees a religious significance to the founding of the state of Israel. Let me say that again. Rav Kook is the first one who sees religious, messianic significance to the founding of the state of Israel. Before that, it was secular people just trying to, be safe, right? So he's, yes, he's the first one who sees a religious significance to the state of Israel. He sees it as the ushering in of messianic times, right? Because all the exiles are coming back, and this is right, the prophets, they predicted Messiah will come after all the exiles come back, and he's like, yes, we're there, this is it, right? Okay, so he's actually very, very balanced. He's observing, he's not trying to do anything about it, but his son, Rabbi Tzvi Yehuda, right, Rabbi Tzvi Yehuda Kook, his son, is actually much more militant. He wants to make things happen, right? So he's one of the people who say, well, we need to, and now you'll see the problem with the current war. He says, not only we should observe that, Israel is a messianic phenomenon, but we should proactively, right, move things in the direction of messianic times, which implies we need to reclaim our borders. And this is where the Gaza issue comes in, right? We need to reclaim our borders, and guess the borders where they are. I love drawing the state of Israel because it's like so annoying. Whoa, okay. All right. Behold, this is the West Bank, ruining everything in a way, right? These are the actual biblical borders are here, right? West Bank is like kind of, in the eyes of many Israelis, it's kind of like a cancer, like, a big thing right in the middle, and then Gaza is, So these guys are saying, no, man, first of all, it's dangerous to have all these Palestinians here in the middle, right? Second of all, they're ruining our borders, right? We want the greater Israel because that's the Israel that the Messiah will come back to, right? So he becomes much more militant in the reclaiming of the borders. And now you have this movement in Israel saying, what, no two-state solution, because that goes against the messianic prophecies, right? And we're going to read one of those messianic prophecies, by the way, in the book of Ezekiel. We're going to see what is actually written there, right? But definitely there is an element when the borders, right, when the Messiah comes, Israel will be rebuilt along these borders. So now there is a militant movement in Israel inspired by the Rabbi Tzvi Yehuda Kook, who says, we need to reclaim our borders. We cannot have Palestinians have their own state. They can live here among us, but we cannot have a two-state solution. That's why when people talk of a two-state solution, it makes me laugh because nobody's interested. This movement, of course, is growing in Israel, right? So nobody is interested if you believe that, right? So that's the Israeli issue, the problem with the two-state solution and why it's insoluble on the Jewish side. We'll look at the Muslim side in a bit. Any questions on Jewish messianism? So by the way, today, you have a number of political parties which have adopted this perspective, and that's the issue, right? And of course, the government of Netanyahu has joined forces with these right-wing parties, and that's why you have Netanyahu pushing for the war, going against the settlement, encouraging the settlements, thinking of annexing Gaza and the West Bank, right? This is because religious Zionism has now become political, right? There are political parties now which espouse this view. Any questions? Yes? Good? All right. Muslim eschatology. Let's just bash everybody today. it's like everybody gonna come out wounded. Okay. Now, Islam traditionally, quick history of Islam. Muhammad, 500 AD, right? Then he spreads because, of course, in the mind of Muhammad, the kingdom of God is, they're straight up about military conquest, right? Unabashedly, the kingdom of God is conquered through the force of arms, right? Once we have those territories, Remember? We create order out of chaos. It's the same idea. Remember that the Israelites were saying we conquered these Canaan to create order out of chaos. The Muslim perspective is the same. We conquer these lands, and then these pagan nations become ordered under the justice of Allah, right? So it's the same idea as the biblical idea of conquering Canaan and creating order out of chaos, getting rid of idolatry, getting rid of, all of these cruel practices, getting rid of corruption, injustice, and creating a just government. Yes, you're smiling.
Literally, because you were talking about the Chelsea earlier, I just got a part 2 coming up.
Oh, look at you. Okay, very good. Okay, so that's the history. So Islam, of course, is spreading. In essence, it is tolerant of Jews and Christians. There is no massive persecution of Jews and Christians in the Muslim empire until recently, right? You have, of course, there's second-rate citizens for sure. I mean, for example, in Algeria, where my predecessors are from, a Jew who was walking on the sidewalk and saw a Muslim had to get down from the sidewalk, walk lower, and then pass, they get back on, right? Or they sometimes had to wear distinctive clothing. So, but nobody was killed, nobody was butchered. In general, it was pretty tolerant. Yeah, you disagree?
There was still tons of violence. Lots of suppression. I get it, persecution is relative. It definitely was not as bad as Christian persecution.
Yeah,
But if you were to forget the existence of Christians, you would still call that persecution. You would see that, you would still call
Yeah, I mean, it's you're second-rate citizen, right?
People discuss that there was a Sephardic Holocaust. That was not at all similar to the Ashkenaz Holocaust, but there were genocides in Sunni, not genocide, but in Iran, Iraq, that people needed to leave.
Okay, yeah, Iran, Iraq, that's another story, and I'm not sure that's you guys, right? I'm not too familiar with Iran, Iraq, but in North Africa, I mean, you had
A little bit, not too much, but it's also more recent.
It's
wasn't- for the
yeah,
majority of
yeah, it's more
history, no, it
recent.
was in the 1880s, early
Yeah.
1900s.
This is when it gets bad, right? But before that, that's when before the 1800s.
Throughout history, it's pretty bad. And
There's always,
it's a contentious thing. I remember we had an interfaith dialogue, and somebody at the interfaith dialogue made that same argument you're making. It's oh, Muslims we never treated the Jews badly. It's the point where some of the great Jewish thinkers the Rambam, they all came out of the Muslim empire. And meanwhile, Rambam is writing in his books these people are persecuting me every day. I can't find any respite
Yes.
from them. We need to run. To the point where there's speculations that Rambam might have secretly converted to Islam, because that's how bad the forced
Yeah.
conversions were.
But there were different strands of Islam too, right? The strand that's persecuted Rambam Maimonides was a very fundamentalist strand, and then there was the more enlightened Islam. So it was a very kind of, but it was never as bad. Let's just leave it at that. It was never as bad as the Inquisition or the Holocaust, right? So, okay, so it was relatively safe. Let's put it this way: it was relatively safe, but it exacerbated in the 1800s. And why? So anti-Semitism was never too much of a big deal in the Muslim world, but it got very bad in the 1800s under the influence of Christianity, right? So Christianity, of course, Christians had conquered most of the Muslim land, right? Anything that they were all over Palestine and Turkey and so forth, they had conquered the Ottoman Empire. And so the ideas, the Christian anti-Semitic worldview was spread through the British Empire, right? Who had conquered most of the Arab lands, Arab territories. So you have the rise of anti-Semitism, but the person I think who really crystallized it and who played a very important role in the context of the Palestinian situation was the Mufti of Jerusalem, very famous, important person. We're just gonna blame everything on him, okay? Just have one scapegoat. His real name is Amin al-Husseini. Okay, Amin al-Husseini. So he's a very important figure, and he's the one really who kind of catalyzed the exponential growth of anti-Semitism in the Muslim world, right? And let's talk about him a little bit. So he was in charge of Jerusalem during the British Mandate. The British Mandate, when Israel was still under British rule. I give you the Jerusalem. I'll give you the dates. He's around in 1921 to 19. So Mufti of Jerusalem, 1921 to 1937, during the British Mandate, right? Jerusalem, as you know, Israel or Palestine at the time was British, right? So he's in charge of the city, but he's also deeply anti-Semitic. He's a personal friend of Hitler's, believe it or not, traveled there, kind of, had nice conversations with Hitler about destroying all the Jews of the planet.
Did you ever meet with Hitler, or was
He
it
did.
only with Cairo that he left? I thought.
I think he went there and visited, possibly even visited some camps, right? So he was into the final solution, like he loved the idea. And there was a kind of discussion between the two of spreading, right, the Holocaust to the Muslim world. So he was all about that. And so he, on the one hand, he's extremely anti-Semitic. On the other hand, he's the co-founder of, and I'm sure you've heard of this group, the Muslim Brotherhood. Anybody heard of them? Muslim Brotherhood? Yes, a few of you. So it's very important. So he's the Mufti and co-founder of the Muslim.
That started in Egypt though, right?
Yep, it did. So this is a very radical form of Islam, which, by the way, the Muslim world does not like, right? Many Muslim countries are very, very uncomfortable with this group. So this, I'm not saying, we're not talking about Islam as a whole, we're talking about a small branch of Islam, which is very loud though. So the Muslim Brotherhood, this is the ideology. They started in Egypt, and their goal, and they're important because they have influenced the whole Middle East, right? Their goal is to have an Islamic empire, right? Or a caliphate, right? This is a big Islamic empire or a caliphate. So in other words, in all of the lands that used to belong to the Muslim world, all of the lands that Muhammad conquered. So this is Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Israel, North Africa, and hopefully the whole world, right? They wanted to be under Muslim rule. You follow? Caliphate. Caliphate, right? So now imagine you have this desire to have a caliphate, meaning a whole big kingdom under Muslim rule in the Middle East. Now, who's ruining everything in the Middle East for this beautiful caliphate? Yes, Israel, full of Jews who are not going to bend to this Muslim rule. So they cannot stand the idea of Israel, right? They want it off the map. And it's interesting because I want to point this out. That the expression that is used to talk about the destruction of the Israel or the Jews in the area is the expression from the river to the sea, whom we've heard in the demonstrations, right? So of course people are like, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. What does this exactly mean, right? So we think today it simply means that Palestinians can finally have their land back, be able to live in their homes. But historically, from the river to the sea has everything to do with the annihilation of Jews and the state of Israel. This is why a lot of people reacted to this expression, right? So the idea here, right, in this the Muslim Brotherhood is they want to have this. So you have how many of you have heard of ISIS? This is part of this ideology. Want a caliphate. How many of you have heard of the Taliban? Same thing. We want a caliphate, right? We want Muslim rule. We want it to spread. So we have this very much right now. The Middle East is entirely propulsed by this ideology, right? Of having this. And of course, Israel is ruining everything. And that's why you have so many nations who are like, let's get rid of these Jews, right? And this is why now we understand why the Palestinians refused. The Palestinians, in a way, have been a pawn in this ideology, right? The Muslim Brotherhood has convinced the Palestinians to opt against their own state or a two-state solution because they want the whole thing, right? Ideologically. Now, the Palestinians would love, I think, to have just their own state and be done with it, right? But the ideology has infiltrated And groups like Hamas are supported by the Muslim Brotherhood, right? Groups like Hamas will never go for a two-state solution. They want the whole thing because they are influenced ideologically by the Muslim Brotherhood. You follow? So that's what's going on, right? That's why it's insoluble. You, as long as the ideology exists, right? We are in trouble, right? In terms of peace. So, okay. So now you see the mindset, right? In Islam, in Judaism, in Christianity, we have this mindset that we want to hasten the coming, or we want to hasten the kingdom, right? This is how I summarize it, okay? In summary, the ideology is on all three levels. I gave you the details, the historical details, the political details, but the ideology is summed up as this. It is the desire to hasten or to quicken or to kind of make faster the kingdom. We want to force the kingdom. We want, is the quote by Jesus here, the violent take it by force, right? The kingdom has to be taken forcibly, right? When Jesus says, he says that, right? The kingdom is for the violent, and the violent take it by force. Yes, believe it or not, Jesus said that, right? So, right, so that's the idea. And this is where we are today. We are in a context where the kingdom wants to be seized by force through political power or military power, right? Yes.
So it's like Christianity, it's being spread out as to government, state, Islam. Or do you say that would be
Military might.
for
And Judaism is politically, right? We have parties now in Israel which are voting against the two-state solution, right? We want a big Israel, no Palestinians, or at least, you know, no Palestinian state. Palestinians are okay, but no Palestinian state, right? So that's where we are. There is a kind of the kingdom is being pushed, right? Is being pushed militarily and politically, and the question is this the right approach to the kingdom, right? And that's what we're going to be studying, right? So everybody good? Yes, are you now up to date to what is happening? Any questions on the current issues or any pushback? Any problems? Okay, so now let me summarize where we're going to go. We're going to look at three kinds of texts. We're going to look at what I call empire texts. 1, 2, 3. We're going to look at kingdom texts. And we're going to look at eschatological texts. Okay. So we're going to look first at the texts which criticize the empire mentality, right? The three movements I told you here are partaking of empire mentality, right? They are coercive, authoritarian, military, violent, right? This I'm grouping under the rubric empire mentality. Everybody follow me? So empire mentality is this: when you want to force the kingdom, that's empire mentality. When you want to use military or political strength to impose the kingdom, you are in the mentality of empire, right?
very
Exactly. It's as long as there is an element of coercion, right? You're forcing this thing, right? You are in the empire mentality. We're going to study this empire mentality. We're going to review the Tower of Babel, which is the beginning of it, right? That's the foundation of empire mentality. Then we will go in Daniel 7 and Revelation 13. Okay, those are the three texts we're going to look at when we start with the empire text, right? Daniel chapter 7. So you can start reading. You should be reading whole book of Daniel, whole book of Revelation. Then we will look at the kingdom texts. Kingdom texts are the texts where Jesus is talking about how his kingdom's supposed to come, right? So he's going to offer, there's going to be, you will see a contrast between the empire mentality and the kingdom mentality of Jesus. We're going to study the Gospels. We're going to look at Matthew 5 and Matthew 13 and Ephesians 5, right? We're going to look at how Jesus envisioned the spread of his kingdom, right? And then in the end, we will look at the eschatological texts. We're going to finish with the texts on hell. We're going to look at hell, Revelation 19 to 21. we're going to look, is there a hell? Is it all already written, right? And of course, we're gonna look at that. Let's see. Okay, that is the program. Next time, when I see you, so during the break, you have 2 weeks. I want you to read 3 books: Daniel, Revelation, Matthew. Okay, Book of Daniel, which is in the Hebrew Bible, Book of Revelation is in the Christian Bible, and the Gospel of Matthew is in the Christian Bible, right? So you will read all 3 books, be very familiar with them. When I meet you, there's still no assignment. I'm going to simply introduce Daniel and Revelation. So you don't have any reading assignment or nothing. And then after that, we'll start with Daniel 7. So that's the program. Yeah.
John is the.
Matthew has the it has the Beatitudes, which I'm interested in, and a number of parables about the kingdom. Mustard seed, and he literally defines what his kingdom's supposed to look like. So that's why I know John is not bad too, but yeah, Matthew has more kingdom texts. Yeah. Okay, any questions? No, all good? All right, ooh, finish right on time. Crazy. Okay,
Great.
have a good break. Yeah.
Now you wanna show me,
Yes.
it's on YouTube, right?